Remember, Joseph Smith has married Emma Hale. Then on September 22nd, 1827, Emma went with him to the hill Cumorah, and he is able to get the plates out of the hill finally. After multiple years of going on that same date and being tutored and taught and trained by Moroni, he now gets the plates out. Thus begins this long process of discovery. Joseph holds plates. They're written in Reformed Egyptian. He has no way of being able to translate them when he first gets them out. He also gets the Urim and Thummim. You'll notice that in those early days, he's making copies of the characters off of the plates. He's even putting pieces of paper and making scratchings on to get the engravings to show up on paper. He's exploring them, but he's not actively translating them. He doesn't seem to know how yet. And you'll notice Martin Harris, a local farmer, owns quite a bit of land. He's very rich. He's well respected in the community. He is made aware of what's going on, and he believes in this work, and he wants to see before he believes. That it seems to be one of the things that Martin is going to deal with repeatedly in this story, is he wants a little more evidence before he's willing to jump in. So we don't know exactly how this happens, but Joseph records some of the characters off of the plates onto a piece of paper. Then he also records what he thinks is a translation. So in order to validate or verify this translation process that Joseph is starting to experiment with, and we don't know whether he did it intentionally or whether the Lord just put some English text in the Urim and Thummim as he's written some of the characters off the plates. We don't have all of the details of this. But what ends up happening is Martin takes this transcript, this piece of paper with some of the Egyptian characters along with an English translation, and he heads east to some of the experts at some of the universities at the time. So he's going to meet with the two prominent ones, Samuel Latham Mitchell and Charles Anthon. And that's where you get that great story of Charles Anthon saying, yes, this is a good translation. Bring the book to me and I'll translate it. And Martin says, well, part of it's sealed. And he says, I can't read a sealed book. And then he asks him where Joseph got the book. And he tells him that the angel had manifested it to him. And then he rips up the certificate that he had written. But that was enough for Martin. Martin now had that testimony, that witness, so to speak, that, hey, this is good. He goes back home, and thus begins the translation process of the small plates. Emma had done a lot of scribing work for Joseph early on, and now Martin picks up there. We have 116 pages. This is the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon, Volume 1, Part 1. So there are two of them, one of two. So these are the size of the pages that have been written. You have 116. Martin has been down in Harmony, Pennsylvania, today called Oakland, Pennsylvania, for enough time that his wife Lucy is concerned that Joseph is swindling her husband out of money, wasting his time, and is going to destroy his character in the process. Martin asks Joseph, he loves the work that they've been doing, and he says, can I take these 116 pages home to show Lucy that what we've been doing is the work of God, and to share these stories with her and with some of the other family members back home in Palmyra? Joseph goes to the Lord and asks that question. And most of you are aware of this story that the Lord, through the Urim and Thummim, says, no, don't let him take the manuscript. So he comes back and he says to Martin, no. The answer's no. At which point Martin, this gentleman who is a man of means and wealth and influence, he's older than Joseph, he says to this young prophet, I've got to be able to take them home in order to be able to help finance and to be able to continue this work. Go and ask the Lord again. At which point Joseph did. And the answer was the same, no, don't do it. He comes back to Martin, and Martin gives him the same response. I have got to be able to take them. I've got to be able to have evidence. I've got to be able to show them in order for me to be able to continue with this work. At which point Joseph goes back and asks the Lord, and the answer was basically, you're not going to take no for an answer. So he can take them if he binds himself with an oath, and you bind yourself with an oath, that he will only show them to 5 specific people, and they're given by name. Well, Martin takes the manuscript, goes home. Turns out he shows them to other people, not just the 5. He's so excited about it. And by the way, it's easy to look back in time and point a finger of scorn at Martin, and I get it. What he did was not appropriate. But at the same time, what I want to say is that how often do you and I sometimes get overzealous and excited about something to the point where we maybe act inappropriately or not with the greatest of wisdom in how we proceed with sacred things or revelations or manifestations that God has given us. And maybe we share them a little too widely, and in the process learn some lessons of life. Well, in the meantime, back in Harmony, Emma has now given birth to their first son. They named him Alvin, after Joseph's older brother who had passed away a few years previously. That little baby boy died, and Emma wasn't doing well. They almost lost Emma as well. A few weeks after the birth, Martin still hasn't returned with the manuscript, and there's no word from him, and Joseph is worried sick. Emma is worried, and she finally convinces him to leave and go back to Palmyra and see what happened. So Joseph, keep in mind, he's about as poor as they come at this phase. They've just lost their first child. He just about lost his wife. He's worried sick about the 116 pages of manuscript, the only copy that Martin has taken, and he doesn't have extra money or extra means to provide for even the most basic needs of his family and of his life. But Emma convinces him to go north and see what happened. So he shows up in Palmyra, and word is sent to the Martin Harris farm to come and see Joseph, and Martin doesn't come for breakfast when he was supposed to be there. He delays, and this causes more anxiety and pressure for Joseph. When Martin finally shows up, he's not looking well, and he drops his utensils, and then here's the dialogue that occurs. Hiram asked, "Are you sick?" And Martin's reply was, "I have lost my soul. I have lost my soul." At which point Joseph jumps up and says, "Oh, Martin, have you lost that manuscript? Have you broken your oath and brought down condemnation upon my head as well as your own?" "Yes," Martin confessed, "it is gone, and I know not where." After Joseph expresses some heartfelt pleas to God, he says, "All is lost. What shall I do? I have sinned. It is I who tempted the wrath of God by asking him for that which I had no right to ask." And he wept and groaned and paced the floor. He thought he'd lost his soul. He and Martin both. Brothers and sisters, this was 116 pages, manuscript pages of Scripture. And And you can picture the feeling, the weight of the reality of what just happened. I've lost Scripture that was translated by the gift and power of God. Now, you'll notice as you open up section 3 in the Doctrine and Covenants that the location puts us where? You're down in Harmony, Pennsylvania. It gives you the date of July 1828. This is after Joseph has returned home to Emma from Palmyra. So he was walking in the woods near the home there when the angel Moroni appeared to him and gave him the Urim and Thummim. At which point he looks into the Urim and Thummim, and it's here, brothers and sisters, it's section 3. It's the first time where Joseph records the first revelation given to him. Now we have section 1 and 2, but the first one where he physically writes it himself. He's not dictating it to a scribe or anyone else. So let's look at this very carefully from a 10,000-foot overview of section 3. Because what's happened is Joseph lost Scripture. And so God is going to need to correct him. There's going to be some discipline. He's this 22-year-old poor farmer who has been called to be a prophet and do the work of God, and yet something went wrong. He gave in to peer pressure. But isn't it interesting how God takes something that looks like a tragic loss, and how God, with His infinite wisdom, can turn it into a glorious learning experience for not only His prophet, but for all of us. You'll notice in section 3 what's going to happen. There's this nice pattern where God opens section 3 with declaring hope for the work moving forward, that nothing can stop the work from progressing. But then He embeds this little rebuke to Joseph. And then in the middle section, He's going to give some hope. And then He's going to give another rebuke and a warning. And then He's going to finish the section with hope and with a glorious promise. Brothers and sisters, there's a beautiful pattern here for dealing with children, for dealing with people. If you're in a leadership position, is you sandwich any rebuke or any correction or any discipline neatly between hope and expressions of love and faith and giving, propping up courage to move forward and not give up. And that's what we see with section 3. Here's the grand irony for me. Knowing that section 3 is our first time where Joseph, using the Urim and Thummim, is going to record a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants, he's opening his story, so to speak. Do any of you find it odd that the prophet would lead out by telling us his worst moment in mortality, where he felt like he had lost his soul, where all is lost? I had this great commission from God, this great calling, and now I've lost it because I gave in to what we would call today peer pressure or something like that. When you're trying to tell your story and maybe convince people that you've been called of God, this is a really odd way to do it, unless it's just the simple reality, unless he's just simply telling his story the way it unfolded, and he's not trying to trick anyone, but he's just saying, this is what happened. And in the process now, you and I can look back in time and say, he lost 116 pages. What was on them? What did he actually lose? And how is this not terrible? Well, let me show you something. If you go to the printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon, and you go to page 117, so we can zoom in here so you can see this. On page 117 of the printer's manuscript, right here at the top, you'll notice on line 3 there, it says the Book of Mosiah, chapter, and then you'll notice there, it's got 3 Roman numerals, I. But the second and the third I are crossed out, leaving it as the Book of Mosiah, chapter 1, instead of what it was originally. They've crossed these out, so it leaves it as chapter 1. Brothers and sisters, what you have in the Book of Mormon today, starting with the Book of Mosiah, chapter 1, is really the original Mosiah, chapter 3, from the original manuscript, and the printer's manuscript reveals this. What you now have is, if you go to our Book of Mormon and open up to the English page 145, where it says the Book of Mosiah, you'll notice that there's no book heading. It's the only major book in the Book of Mormon, multi-chapter book, that doesn't have a book intro, a book heading. All of the other ones have those. It's also the only book in the Book of Mormon to begin with a guy whose name isn't at the top of the book. This isn't the Book of Benjamin, and yet the Book of Mosiah begins with Benjamin. In other words, the Book of Mosiah originally would have started with Benjamin's father, Mosiah the first, because what you have is King Mosiah, whose son is Benjamin, whose son is Mosiah the second. So what we get in the Book of Mormon today, starting in page 145, is it picks up the story of King Benjamin most of the way through his reign as a king. What we're missing is all of this. Mosiah the First's writings and the beginning of Benjamin's ministry, and we're missing the book heading to Mosiah. Apparently, this is all part of the lost 116 pages, which starts with the Book of Lehi. So look at what we've lost. Mormon has abridged. Mormon went to a lot of work reading. If you look at our conceptual drawings of Mormon's cave, if you look here at this large collection of the plates of Nephi, Mormon has read all of the records from Lehi all the way down through Mosiah the First, and he's abridged them. He's written the record onto the plates of Mormon. He went to a lot of effort to get us to this point, and we're going to lose Mormon's abridgment of the Book of Lehi all the way down to this point. Now, do any of you find it odd that back in 2nd Nephi, when Nephi tells you once they got to the Promised Land, he made plates and he recorded all of the history, and then after he had done that, the Lord said, now, make a second record, a smaller record, only record the things of your soul, the spiritual stuff. Can you picture Nephi saying, well, that makes no sense. I've already recorded all this. Why should I do it again? So God asks him to do a second version, but keep it smaller and simpler and more focused on the spiritual things. Years and years later, centuries later, when Mormon is going through these records that you see on the screen again of the large plates of Nephi, he tells you that he was searching among the records and he found a small set of plates, this little teeny record in comparison to the large collection of plates. And he read through it and he said, wow, these things please me. This is the record of the prophets from Nephi, including some of the words of Jacob. And he said, I don't know why. This is for a wise purpose unto the Lord, but I'm going to include this with my record. And so he puts it on with his plates, even though he has already abridged this whole history. He finds that small set of plates and he says, okay, I'm going to include those with my plates as well, but they cover the same time period. But you'll notice, brothers and sisters, in 1st Nephi through Omni, the small plates, Omni, there's no abridgment from Mormon. He's not telling you any story in 1 Nephi through Omni. It's all I Nephi, I Jacob, I Jerem, I Enos, so on and so forth. All of these prophets are speaking in first person. Mormon didn't abridge it. He just stuck it on with his plates. Interesting. Nephi got to write a whole bunch of scripture that would never go live. Mormon got to abridge and work on reading records and abridging them, and it never went live. Joseph Smith got to experience translating scripture, a lot of it, 116 pages, but it's never going to go live. And now we lose all of those prophets' efforts. And God says, oh, that wise purpose that Mormon didn't know why he was including it, and Nephi didn't know why he had to write a second record. I know why. Because we knew that we were going to lose this. And isn't it interesting that it looks like a tragedy, but in reality what we get instead is probably a better version of what we would have had in the first place, which is Mormon's abridgment of all of these people. But now we get this first-person account that covers mostly the same, it covers the same time period, but we don't get a lot of stories here. So we're missing those. I guess what I'm saying, brothers and sisters, if God goes to that great of effort to make sure that what was lost isn't permanently lost, but there's a beautiful replacement for it that's possibly even better than the original, if he'll do that with a book, I'm convinced that he'll do that with his children, with the children of God. That he'll bring things into your life. He'll prepare you today. He'll ask you to do some things this week or this month or this year that make no sense to you. You're going to say things like Nephi, well, I've already done that record, or like Mormon, but I've already included those time periods in my abridgment. I don't need to put this on. It's a duplicate. It's not necessary. God knows what he's doing with scriptures over millennia, spanning, thousands of years. God knows what he's doing, spanning days, months, weeks, and years in our life. And so don't be shocked when he has you doing things that for the present moment make no sense to you. It comes down to this idea of, do you trust him enough to obey and move forward?